So this is Jump Right In for week 7 and chapter 7 in Lee Miller's textbook, and I promise that I will not keep you nearly as long as I did with last week's. In my general psychology course, I tease my students often at the very beginning when we're going over the syllabus and tell them that there is an objective that I don't list in the syllabus, and that is for those of you who don't already have a main squeeze, that your objective, you must add also to your list of objectives one that says you will have a main squeeze by the end of the term. Of course, I'm not serious about this, and I have reactions from students that vary from these wry smiles like I know this is not true to those who are looking panicked. So I kind of know pretty easily who has and has not found themselves main squeezes at that point in time. But for those students who panic, one of the things that probably, if that were a serious goal or a serious objective, one of the things that might help would be this chapter, which is laws of attraction. So there's probably like a couple of dozen of laws of attraction, so we're going to focus on the ones that Lee Miller, for the most part, has focused on. And so first of all, the first one will be this idea of instant attraction or first impressions. So he mentioned that at the very beginning. And by the way, when we're talking about attraction, a lot of these things, not all of them, a lot of these things pertain to platonic friendships as well as to romantic ones. It's just that usually the extremity or the intensity is different in terms of these two categories of relationships. So we have first impressions, right, of people. So if we feel good about somebody that we see for the first time or meet for the first time, then we're already predisposed to like them. So that's what he means by that instant attraction sort of thing. This also lends us to issue a word of warning as well, because of the fact that if we are in a bad mood, for example, sometimes we project that mood onto the person that we first meet, right? So we may miss an opportunity to establish a friendship ultimately, or to establish a romantic relationship because of the way we project things. Another thing is that if we are in a very positive kind of mood, then we may evaluate somebody in a more positive way than they really deserve. So those things are important. Then there is what Lee Miller calls the propinquity effect. I don't like that word particularly. I suspect I used it in your quiz though, but I prefer the term proximity effect, which he also issues as an alternative in the textbook, right? And so that just means that you are more likely to be drawn to somebody that's kind of in your geographical area. This is logistical. This is like if somebody goes to the same school, or if they are in your similar social circles or clubs that you belong to, then you're going to be closer to them and gives you a chance to establish a relationship with them. So that's the proximity effect. So you're not as likely, say, if you're visiting another state or you're at a concert that's a couple of 100 miles away, you're not as likely to be keyed into other individuals there to establish either friendships or romances. I mean, maybe a meaningful one-night stand, as some people may establish that as an objective for that sort of thing. But generally speaking, those individuals are kind of counted out in terms of serious relationships. And that kind of ties in with the mere exposure effect too, except we add one component of mere exposure effect, and that is the more frequently you encounter someone, then research has indicated the more we tend to like them. And you've seen that happen. If you have a job, whether full-time or part-time, and you first started, you probably felt pretty isolated and alone when you first got there. So, but after time went by, then you were drawn to your cohorts in the workplace. Same thing with first day of a face-to-face class, right? You're going to feel like a stranger unless you and a friend happen to sign up for the same class, right? And then after a while you feel a little more camaraderie developing there. So that's what we mean by mere exposure effect. Then the similarity effect. So basically we find out that in the beginning, as far as romance is concerned, you're looking for similarities. All right, so and so that has a big impact, probably more of an impact on your platonic friendships. It's more important there because it's hard to maintain a platonic friendship when you don't have any common interest. However, with romance, you got that physical thing where when you're being attracted to somebody, the sexual attraction is there, the passionate love, and then the companionate love. And as your relationship evolves, then you find out, well, we do have some differences. So are you going to end the relationship over that? We find out that most people do not. I can give you a good example of this. It's rather an extreme example. There is a guy by the name of James Carville, and James Carville, for those of you who don't keep up with politics, he is a spokesperson, a mouthpiece, a pundit for the Democratic Party. His wife, Mary Madeline, is the same kind of person. You know, she is a mouthpiece, a spokesperson for the Republican Party, and they've been married for several decades, right? So, they tend to have a good relationship, and yet they don't see eye to eye at all politically. Now, to lead us into something else that LeMiller touches on is that James Carville is in his mid-70s. Mary Madeline is in her mid-60s. So they're kind of also a textbook example of the evolutionary theory as far as attraction is concerned, which states, as you may already have encountered in the textbook, that men are drawn toward women who are younger than they are, primarily because, evolutionarily speaking, the goal was, I want somebody who can have viable pregnancies and be a good mother to my offspring, and their pregnancies will be successful. Women, on the other hand, and we're talking only heterosexual relationships here, women, on the other hand, are drawn to men who are slightly older. Now, we, of course, find outliers and exceptions to this all the time, but, of course, as I said, you may already know this, women are looking, according to the evolutionary psychologists and theorists, women are looking for men who are slightly older because they can be good providers for them, take care of them and their offspring, and provide the security that they look for as well. Then there is something, as far as the evolutionary theory is concerned, we ignore sexual variance pretty much until fairly recently, when some scientists came up with some theories saying, well, maybe it is evolution that has caused us to have people who are born to families who are gay and lesbian, right? So maybe we can explain the gay uncle and the lesbian aunt as individuals who are not as likely to have children as the heterosexual members of the family, and if something happened to the mother and father of an offspring, then the uncle or the aunt could step into that caregiver role at some point. We also find out in terms of the similarity effect, that the similarity tends to more and more transcend ethnic and racial differences. From my own perspective, I really don't view race as a real thing. It is more of a construct because there's essentially no significant DNA differences among all races. This merely has to do with the chemical called melanin in our skin, right, and also in our eyes that determines eye color as well. We do find that around 10% of individuals who are heterosexual tend to marry interracially, and as far as couples, and whether married or significant others or partnered in gay and lesbian communities, about twice that many are involved with in interracial relationships. We also find, let me accelerate a bit for you, we also find the scarcity theory goes into effect. Distance makes the heart grow fonder is an old cliche from way back. I remember when my grandmother had used that even. And so essentially, my grandmother was correct, according to the scientists, that basically when you spend the time you spend away from the people that you're in love with and the person you're in love with, the more you miss them, the more you cherish them, the more you value them. And of course, we don't really need to say anything about the sexual arousal bit with the physical changes that occur there. But there are two other biological things that we do need to bring up. One of those has to do with pheromones. So it's not just other members of the animal kingdom. Humans also respond to smell, even though it's pretty much on the subconscious level. And then oxytocin is the love hormone. I may have mentioned that before. So essentially it tends to draw us together. So the next to the most intense release of oxytocin would be during sexual intimacy between two people, or I guess I should say two or more people. And also oxytocin is generated most intensely during childbirth, because we got to have something to bond the mother and child together, because that's not exactly the most pleasant experience to give birth, right? Okay, and then finally, the last thing that I'd like to point out is that, of course, we are attracted by what we consider to be people who are physically attractive. And of course, that's going to vary from person to person, based on taste, based on classical conditioning, because what we find appealing about individuals often happens, again, on a more or less subconscious level. It's kind of conditioned in us as we grow up, as we grow through our development as youngsters and adolescents. But here's what we find out about those individuals we find attractive. Not only do we think they're attractive, we also think that they are higher in degrees of competence, in degrees of success, in likability, and also in terms of being interesting people. So LaMiller doesn't go quite far enough in this theory, I don't think, because he doesn't, I don't recall in my last review of this chapter, I don't think he mentions the effects of people finding other individuals attractive, the effects on the person who is considered attractive. Because there are some people who are just so classically attractive, or maybe instead of classically, I should be using the word stereotypical. Stereotypically attractive, right? Because they hear it a lot. Oh, you're such a gorgeous man or a gorgeous woman, right? That they hear this all the time, so they know that they have this regard. And so what we've discovered in our studies in psychology is that attractive individuals often find navigating the treacherous waters of romance to be a big challenge, because of the fact that they wonder, is someone attracted to me because of who I am as a person, or are they attracted to me only because of that physical appeal? Okay, so I hope you have a good week. That's it for this particular chapter, and if you have any questions or concerns, let me know, and take care.